I am here with Mike Rowe, host of Dirty Jobs. He's not only starring in, but he also wrote Something to Stand For with Mike Rowe. Mike, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm here in my bunker, hunkered down, ready to talk about whatever you want to talk about, living the Vida Loca.
Amazing. So you described this film as something different than most films we've seen. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what's different about Something to Stand For?
Virtually everything. I mean, it's not a documentary, although there's an awful lot of information in it. It's not a classic narrative, although there are 300 actors in it. Basically, you have 9 stories that were written in the style of the late, great Paul Harvey, who did a great radio show called The Rest of the Story. And I used to love those as a kid. You know, it was a great chance to learn something you didn't know about somebody you do. And the little biographies presented as mysteries. So you got a chance to figure out who he was talking about along the way. That was the formula that I used when I launched my podcast 8 or 9 years ago. And I wrote a few hundred stories that fit that format. Well, this movie really took 9 of those stories, adapted them for the big screen. It's storytelling. It's a love letter to our history. It's not a political movie, but it's very patriotic. These are really entertaining stories brought to life in a really fun way. But I hope that putting them out there in this way on the big screen will hopefully remind people that, you know, before we're Republicans, before we're Democrats, before we're liberals or conservatives, we're Americans. And there's still a lot to be proud of and a lot to be grateful for and a lot to celebrate.
I really felt that watching it. So this is a bit of a guessing game when we're watching the film. We're kind of like, who is he talking about? Who's he referencing in this situation? I loved that about it. And it gave us a sense of story first, I
Mm.
think. So, and I think you also talked a little bit about that in the film. Can you discuss your decision to do that?
There are a lot of ways to tell a story, and there's certainly a lot of ways to talk about our shared history. The podcast is called The Way I Heard It, and the movie very nearly was, because it's kind of important to me anyway to remind the viewer that I'm not an expert. I'm not a historian. You know, I'm just the son of a social studies teacher who did a great job of kindling my curiosity about our country when I was a kid. And I just wanted to be clear that, look, I've done the research, and we talked at length with a lot of historians who claim to know, but in the end, I wasn't there, when the Declaration was signed. I wasn't in the room when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. I can only tell you what I heard and why I believe it's important to us collectively. But with respect to telling stories, look, I've always been drawn to the Paul Harvey model. I missed a flight once because I was sitting in my car in long-term parking and I couldn't get out until I heard him, you know, reveal the subject. And I wanted to use that kind of storytelling and drag it forward into the modern age. And Something to Stand For ultimately is that. That wound up becoming the title because it's the title of the final story in the movie. And look, even though I said it's not political, and it's not, uh, it is another nod to these times we're in, and the fact that so many people seem to be grappling with, who are we really? What can we still come together around collectively? What can we agree on? It is good and decent. What can we stand for together? In other words, so that's how the stories work. That's why the title is what it is. And Independence Day seemed like a nice day to land the plane, as it were.
Yeah, I love that. The plane that we missed because we were listening to
Very
you.
nice. Look at you bringing it back.
So then who would you say you made this film for? What did you want people to get out of it?
Well, this will sound awfully self-involved, I suppose, but I kind of made it for me in part. I guess on a micro level, you could say I did that. On a macro level, I do feel like the country um, needs to come together and needs to be able to agree on some on some basic things about who we are as a people. And finally, I did it for my dad. I did dirty jobs for my grandfather, who was just an amazing tradesman who built the house I was born in without a blueprint, and just had a mix of skill and entrepreneurship that I tried to find in the people we profiled on that show. My dad was a social studies teacher. He knew that he had to make history interesting for people who didn't care about history. And I love that about him, and I love that he did that, and I think he's going to enjoy the movie too. Sadly, he's only one guy and he can only buy one ticket, so that's not going to please the box office. But one at a
Are you gonna
time,
make him
Robin.
buy a ticket?
Yeah. At this point, I think I think I've earned it. I'd say, hey, Dad, that's
Yeah.
something to stand for. Buy your own ticket.
I think my dad will also like this movie.
And in real time, you and I are talking on D-Day, and we just
Oh,
had
yes.
Memorial Day, right? I mean, the armed forces do play a big part in this movie. It's not just founding fathers. It's not just, instrumental individuals who help build the country. It's the millions of men and women who put on a uniform. And
Mhm.
and I mean, God, if you can't stand for them, you know, you might as well sit the rest of your life.
Yeah, well said. So one more question for you. What's your favorite movie theater experience?
Movies were a huge part of my life, but I hadn't been to one in ages. And then in I think it must have been 23, I was in Texas and Top Gun Part 2 came out, and it was such a great movie to see in a theater. And I hadn't been in a theater in so long that I actually did something I never do, which is I bought popcorn and a Coke. I don't eat popcorn and I don't drink Coke, but it just was like, you know what? I'm going to sit there and I'm going to have the whole surround sound giant screen experience. And it was great. And it's one of those things, Robin, you don't realize you miss it until all of a sudden you're in it.
So then where can people find your film?
I think we're going to be in 1,000 or 1,100 theaters at this point, maybe more, but it's only going to be out for a week, and it'll start June 27th and run through Independence Day. So that's it. 1 week. Take the family. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll stand, you'll clap, and you'll say, something, that Mike Rowe. He's okay. I
He's
hope.
all right.